Bill Brush is up next. I think he's familiar to many of you in our industry. He was not able to be here today, so we have a recorded presentation kind of taking the basic concepts of what are soils and the key components that Carl took us through and applying that directly to almonds. Why does this matter for almonds specifically? So we're going to go ahead and play that.
Hi, I'm Bill Brush from Modesto, California. We're a longtime family farmer in this area since 1854 to be exact. And I still farm some of those same lands down in and around the San Joaquin River. Right now we farm almonds, walnuts, and a little bit of pecans. And basically I've been farming essentially all my life. From my dad was a farmer, my grandfather, all the way down, so it's been in me. Attended school at UC Davis, graduated in 1973, and my experience also includes time on the almond board, where I spent somewhere 13 to 14 years, both on committees, the PR and advertising committee, the finance committee, and also as an alternate to the board and also as a board member. And that was a great experience to get some of the information that I've learned over the years out. And I said before that, I also had time spent at an ag retailer, Stanislaus Farm Supply, for over 20 years. And then, which is most pertinent to this conference, and about 20 years ago, I started an ag consulting business. And that ag consulting business is focused on soils and soil health, and also water and water quality. So that's what I came here to speak about today. The soil is the growing medium for your crops. It's what sustains life for your crop. It's what sustains life for humans. It is the most important thing that we do. And even though we've had soil since time began, is so little known directly to the farmer as a lot of times as to what he needs, which is what I saw a point that farmers need to know more, and they need to know more of how things work, what the biological system is of this, and how it can best sustain you, not only as a grower, but as a grower that can be happy with the quality and quantity that you grow, and not just in any one year, but for the long term, creating healthier plants through healthier soils. Well, the first thing that I always I'm surprised about when I come to something like this is that they say, well, we're going to have a soil conference about healthy soils. So what do you want to say? I don't want a healthy soil? It's kind of ridiculous. Of course, we want clean air, we want clean water, and we want healthy soils. You wouldn't want unhealthy soils. So it comes down, what's that definition? And I kind of have one here that I like. And soil health is defined as the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. This definition speaks to the importance of managing soils so they are sustainable for our future generations, okay? The problem is it's the devil's in the details, isn't it? It always is. So I always tell people, if anybody comes and tells you with a solution that says this is the only thing you need to do, run and run fast, because it's always multiple things. So I'm going to tell you that key to soil health is not just one thing, but I will tell you it is just one thing. And that one thing is the biology with which we have in the soil. The soil, pinch of soil, if you go home, look at your soil, your garden, even your yard at home, and take a pinch of soil between your fingers like that. There's approximately at least 7 billion organisms in that pinch. In other words, you're holding the number of people that inhabit the planet just within your fingertips, and that's what you get out of that soil. The average soil, the crux, and what really makes things grow is that top 6 to 7 inches, which we call the aerobic zone, which is the depth that air can get down through that soil, because this microbiology needs 2 things to live: air and water. So if it can't get air, it's not going to survive. It's going to sit there in a spore form or in some form that will come back to life when it gets the proper amount of air and water. If it has not enough water, it does the same thing. So the key to growing anything is keeping the microbiology as happy and as robust as we can get it. So when I say it is the microbiology, but if you don't have your soil balanced where you can get air down into that soil and get water to move through that soil profile, you're not ever going to be really successful at growing the top yields and sustaining your soil for the long haul. One of the things I hear all the time from, and everybody likes to put labels on things. The new buzzword now is either sustainable or it's regenerative. Well, the one thing that's good about sustainable, makes sense that we need to keep these growing and growing a long periods of time, on and on and on for generations, because it is what sustains the human population. Without the soil, we would be gone in just a very short period of time. We have, if people stop farming today, we have less than 30 days of a lot of the things that we eat and consume every day. Think about that. 1 month we'd be out of food. So the constant turnover of the soil and cropping and understanding of replenishing what we're removing and going back and regenerating those things that we're removing. The one thing that I've seen that I disagree a lot of times with certain people or certain focuses, when you look at regenerative ag, the one thing soil microbes, those mold, yeast, fungi, bacteria, all of those combined, the one thing they can't do is they're not manufacturers. So if I have an orchard here that is short of zinc, it can't make zinc out of anything. The only thing it can do is mineralize the available zinc and feed it to the crop you're trying to grow. But if you need higher zinc levels, or if you need higher calcium or magnesium or any of those levels, you need to add those to the soil. Now you can add those in some of the things you're doing, like you can do some composting. Great things to do, particularly if you've got light sandy soils with limited ability to hold and store nutrients, because that function is held on the clay particles. And the definition of sand is essentially the lack of those clay particles. And so you need to know what I have here to start with, which is the first criteria that I tell all the growers that I work with. You can't fix what you can't measure. So we have to measure what's in the soil, and we have to put those nutrients that we're short of, or to balance out those major cations of calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, and get them in the right balance, so that now that soil is able to receive water properly. It flocculates properly by the calcium molecules, basically pulling together, creating air spaces for those microbes to thrive in. So because of this particular situation, I have frequently taken growers to the orchard. We learn a lot by seeing what's happening in the orchard. And the first thing that we'll see when we get growers to the orchard is they look up. And they look up because that's where the crop is. Even when they're looking at field crops that may be waist high, they're looking at the grain, or they're looking at the money maker of there. And it's understandable that they want to know what crop it is. But I always say, take that vision and look down, because down is where all this crop is made from. The nutrients are down in the soil. And we can add things to leaves, foliars, we can do a lot of things, but essentially the pounds, the meat, most of the volume has to come from the soil. So if we don't have it properly balanced, what happens next is we don't have the proper environments for the microbes. I've studied a lot from a professor. He's long since passed away, by the name of Dr. William Albrecht from the University of Missouri. And he taught a lot of soil science over the years. And what he said is, feed the soil and the soil will feed the plant. But what I like to add, and then the plants will feed the humans, or feed the livestock, or feed whatever that crop is intended for. And it's without that understanding that soil is where it comes from, that's where everything begins. The other thing that people don't understand, Dr. Albrecht also said one thing that I use frequently and tell people. He said, the microbes eat at the first table, is exactly how he phrased it. Meaning, you ever go to a wedding and you got a buffet, who eats? The first table. Okay, and they get first chance at everything we put on the soil. And so they're going to take it and mineralize it. It's also known that anything that's went through a plant or an organism becomes more biologically available to the next generation, which is these trees that we're looking at. So they are important that we're thriving, being able to mineralize, because we make it easier for our crop to pick up those nutrients. We also look at, I know that everybody looks at what we apply, because it costs money. So we're going to keep real clear focus of what we're applying to the soil. How many pounds, how many units, not too much, just enough. Make sure we have enough to feed that crop. But nobody looks at it in terms of the nutrients that we apply. And the biggest ones we apply are the ones that we don't care much about, or we don't put a lot of consideration to, which is carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Those are what the plant cannot do without. Carbon dioxide to run photosynthesis, H2O, water, because it has to have water to live. So that is where it is. And we like, if we can get our carbon areas built up in the soil, it's another form for those microbes, because they are carbon-eating machines. Remember, the soil has to do two things. It has to take air and it has to take water, both of them in. And the perfect soil, which Dr. Albrecht said, I like to say it's not necessarily the perfect soil, but it is the perfect condition for microbes and plants to take up. And that's about 50%, or 45% to be exact, of mineral, okay? And that's things you can't change, the clay, the silica, the sand particles, everything that you have here. 45% of your soil is that. If you're lucky, 5% is organic matter, or soil humus, true soil humus, which is a stabilized form of organic matter. 25% air, and 25% water. Well, what can change? The mineral can, and the organic matter doesn't change very much. So what changes all the time is water and air. Basically, we're putting on water, and we're taking out air. The air moves back in, and we're taking out water, and they're moving back. And the closer we can keep them to that 25%, equal amounts of air and water, or where microbes, the microbial population thrives, and the plants thrive. I've just given you a thumbnail sketch of what's really important about ag and farming, and how you make your soils healthier and getting them back to where we really want them to be. But what I really want you to know is these conferences are important because they highlight something that I think's been overlooked time and time again. We're worried about production, looking up instead of looking down. I want to get a generation of people that are looking down first, seeing what the soil tilth, the soil health, and how my soil is working, and then we'll see how well it's doing in the field. So if we can get that conversation started, I've done my job. I appreciate your time. Have a great conference, and I'll hopefully see people soon.